Hello, yes, here in front of you, H.M. Kalita, Senior Faculty Member of Ecolibbo Residential IS Coaching Academy, Guwahati. Our today's discussion, again from Assam history. Here we'll discuss non-cooperation movement and Assam. The discussion will focus on Assam's participation in non-cooperation movement of 1920 to 1922. Here we will discuss those leaders of Assam that took part in the non-cooperation movement. Here we will also discuss about the maiden visit of Mahatma Gandhi. His maiden visit on August 1921. All inclusive we will discuss in this article. So let us start about the non-cooperation movement and Assam. The publication of Montego Chelmsford report, the publication of Montford report, which in its turn introduced diarchy, introduced bicameralism in the provincial administration. You also know the Montford report formed the basis of Government of India Act 1919 and also the perpetuated, the much condemned separate electorate created by Morley-Minto reforms of 1909 that brought about a split in the ranks of the Congress. The Congress divided and a new group formed by the moderate. The moderate accepted what was given and formed a separate party of their own, and they call it Indian Liberal Federation. The new part of Indian National Congress formed by moderate was known as Indian Liberal Federation. Gandhiji at this critical moment, Gandhiji at this critical junction he was for seeing how the reforms worked. But Jallianwala Bagh massacre, the Khilafat agitation and industrial unrest involving nearly 15 lakh workers in no fewer than 200 strikes all over the country during the first half of 1920 made Gandhiji change his mind. So, after Jallianwala Bagh massacre and after the Khilafat agitation and those industrial strike, industrial unrest that involved around 15 lakhs workforce, Gandhiji had to change his mind with a view to organizing a spontaneous upsurge of the people everywhere into a single anti-British mass movement. Gandhiji decided upon non-violent, non-cooperation with the government and persuaded the Indian National Congress to adopt a resolution on this effect. So, Mahatma Gandhi was going to start a non-violent, non-cooperation with the government, and he urged upon the Indian National Congress to adopt a resolution in this effect. On a special session held at Calcutta in September 1920, the famous resolution of non-cooperation movement was adopted, that was passed, which recommended the renunciation of government titles, boycott of legislatures, boycott of law courts, boycott of school and colleges, and subsequently non-payment of taxes. So, on a special session of Calcutta that held in September 1920, the famous resolution of non-cooperation was passed by the Indian National Congress, and that recommended for give up of government titles, that is renunciation of government titles, boycott of legislatures, boycott of law courts, boycott of schools and colleges, and subsequently non-payment of taxes. The object of Indian National Congress was now more clear. The object of Indian National Congress was more clearly defined than ever as attainment of Swarajya, attainment of self-rule by all legitimate and peaceful means. This policy resolution changed the very scope and character of the movement from the so-called, it was a middle class people of the society took part in the previous those Swadeshi movement or any other movement, mainly those middle class people of the society took, but the policy resolution of non-cooperation movement changed those confined to middle class, and it touches those, what I can say, entire peasants, entire peasantry, and the entire working classes. Now, in the non-cooperation movement, when the resolution was passed, it has spread, and all classes of people, all those middle class, all those peasantry, all those working classes were ready to take part in the non-cooperation movement. Assam also found herself in the thick of the movement. Assam also found herself in the thick of the movement. A section of the Assamese intelligentsia had already came under the spell of Gandhiji's teaching. Many of them were attracted towards the Indian National Congress, which in its Calcutta session 1917 considered the principle of linguistic provinces. In the Calcutta session of 1917 of INC, they have considered the principle of linguistic provinces, that is, provinces will be granted on the basis of linguistic. Torun Ram Phukan and England returned Barrister, who was grown in the tradition of his grandfather Jagniaram Khargoria Phukan. Torun Ram Phukan and England returned Barrister, who was brought up in a traditional family of his grandfather Jagniaram Khargoria Phukan. He was going to be the new General Secretary to replace Ghanshyam Borua in Assam in 1918. So Torun Ram Phukan and England returned Barrister, who was also the member of Assam Legislative Council, and he has represented Assam Valley landlords community in the Assam Legislative Congress since 1912. Now in the picture, the entry of Torun Ram Phukan started. While a young man of radical views, Chandranath Harma, was elected as one of Assistant Secretary of Assam Association. First, the person in the name of Ram Pukon, he became the General Secretary and he replaced Ghanshyam Bodwa in 1918 in Assam Nation. Then came radical, extremist leader, his view is always radical, Chandranath Harma as Assam Association's Assistant Secretary. Even Navin Chandra Bordloi, a petty tea planter, an admirer of British till then. Navin Chandra Bordloi was a petty tea planter and he was an admirer of British rule till then, and who had been practicing in Calcutta High Court, changed his views about British rule, and he was elected the next General Secretary of Assam Association in 1919 in Borpeta session. That means Ram Pukon became General Secretary of Assam Nation 1918. In 1919, Navin Chandra Bordloi became General Secretary at the Borpeta session in 1919. The year witnessed Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhuri publishing his new periodical, that is Chetona. As you know, Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhuri always an extremist in nature, he was a radical in nature. He has started publishing his new periodical called Chetona, which spread his radical views on Swadeshi. Then finally came the student body of Assam Chhatra Sanmilan. Finally came out the students in a body of Assam Chhatra Sanmilan. They hold their session at Tezpur under the presidency of Acharya P.C. Ray, and those students of Assam Chhatra Sanmilan resolved to go for Swadeshi in place of foreign goods. First came Ram Pukon, then came Chandranath Harma, then Navin Chandra Bordloi, Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhuri, and then came the students' body of Assam Chhatra Sanmilan. And in the Tezpur session, they have decided to go for Swadeshi. That means they are going to join the non-cooperation movement, and they decided to go for Swadeshi in place of all foreign goods. Assam leaders initiated the movement with an organized attempt towards Hindu and Muslim unity. They called a Khilafat meeting at Guwahati on March 9, 1920 in March 9, 1920 with Ram Pukon on the chair and observed Hartal on that day in support of Khilafat movement. A condolence meeting was also held at Guwahati to mourn the death of Tilak, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, on August 1920. By September, political activities at various levels had created the optimum condition for launching the non-cooperation movement in Assam too. That means Assam was now ready to launch the non-cooperation movement. Later, in a meeting held at Guwahati on October 11, members of the Assam Association, at the pursuance of Chandranath Harma, resolved to extend their support for non-cooperation movement. Now, there was a meeting at Guwahati on October 11, 1920, and those members of the Assam Association took a resolution to extend their support for the non-cooperation movement. They also unanimous in their decision to boycott foreign goods, and also they will boycott the forthcoming election to First Reform Council. Those are the decisions taken by the members of Assam Association. They took first decision to extend the support for non-cooperation movement. Then they unanimous decision to boycott foreign goods, and also they will boycott the forthcoming election to the reform. What I mean to say that decision to boycott the foreign goods and the election to the First Reform Council. And also they have resolved to implement the Swadeshi program. The Assam Valley Muslim Association also extended its support to non-cooperation movement by adopting a resolution to this effect in a meeting held at Jorat on October 27, 1920 under the chair of Deveshwar Harma. So, the Assam Valley Muslim Association also extended support for the non-cooperation movement. But Tafazul Hussain Hazarika, the president-elect to the Assam Valley Muslim Association, and a deep letter, dissociated himself from it by staging a walkout in the meeting. The 5th Surma Valley Provincial Conference held on 19th and 20th September of 1920 under the presidency of Abdul Karim and Bipin Chandra Pal, one of the Indian nationalist leaders, taking part in the deliberation there, and appealed to the students to boycott their classes in support of non-cooperation movement. Those Surma Valley Provincial Conference under the chairmanship of Abdul Karim and the Indian national leaders like Bipin Chandra Pal, they appealed to the students to boycott their classes in support of non-cooperation movement. Meanwhile, in Assam Valley, leaders like Navin Chandra Bordloi, Torun Ram Phukon, Chandranath Harma, accompanied by band of volunteers, they visited village to village to spread the ideas of non-cooperation. So, time was ripe to start the non-cooperation movement in Assam. And by this time, all the leaders, they visit with their supporters, with their volunteers to village to spread the message of non-cooperation. Within short time, non-cooperation became a popular cry, and there was hardly a home in Assam which did not hear of it. So propaganda was very wide, and everybody in Assam, they heard about the non-cooperation movement. When school students of Sipsagar got an idea of non-cooperation movement, they refused to pay fees, and the students of Mongoldoi boycotted classes. The non-cooperation now started. Those students studying in Sipsagar, they refused to pay the fees, and the students from Mongoldoi, they boycotted their classes. Meetings were held which decided to boycott all occasions of welcoming the Viceroy Lord Samspur in his proposed visit to Assam. So, meetings were held to boycott the occasion of welcoming the Viceroy Lord Samspur, his proposed visit to Assam. But notwithstanding the opposition, the Viceroy undertook his visit to Assam on November 1920, and government also held the election to the First Reform Council. And in that election, the people didn't participate. The Guwahati decision on non-cooperation. The Guwahati decision on non-cooperation was ratified in 17th Annual Conference of Assam Association held at Tezpur in December 1920. That means the Guwahati decision of joining, extending support to non-cooperation was ratified, gave consent, gave approval by the Assam Association in a meeting held at Tezpur in the 17th session of Assam Association meeting held at Tezpur on December 1920 under the chairmanship of Prasanna Kumar Borwa. So, the movement, non-cooperation movement, that resolution was given consent by the Assam Association. That means they have given green signal, they have approved the decision taken by the Guwahati session of those resolutions. Almost simultaneously with the Tezpur session of Assam Association, the 35th session of the Indian National Congress met at Nagpur in 1920, where Gandhiji's resolution of non-cooperation was passed in Calcutta session, also ratified. That means the Calcutta session of INC passed the resolution, and in the Nagpur session of 35th session held in December 1920, they also gave their consent, they have ratified those resolutions passed by the Calcutta session. In that meeting in Nagpur, Gandhiji reiterated Swaraj as self-government within the empire if possible. Swaraj as self-government within the empire if possible, and he added Swaraj as self-government outside the empire if necessary. They want self-government within the empire if possible. If necessary, they will go Swaraj outside the empire. Navin Chandra Bordloi with a number of delegates from Assam Association attended the Nagpur session of those 35th All India, this Indian National Congress meeting was attended by Navin Chandra Bordloi along with members of delegates from Assam Association. And Navin Chandra Bordloi, who never wavered from the Gandhiji's stand on non-cooperation. At Nagpur, Navin Chandra Bordloi assisted the organization in drafting the Congress Constitution. In drafting the Congress Constitution, Navin Chandra Bordloi was also a member of Nagpur session. So, Navin Chandra Bordloi was also a member in Nagpur session in drafting the Congress Constitution. Same time, students from Guwahati under the leadership of Chandrakanta Harma attended the All India Students Conference held at Nagpur. Same time, Chandranath Harma along with other leaders, they attended the All India Students Conference at Nagpur, and that meeting was presided by Lala Lajpat Rai. That meeting of All India Students Conference supported the non-cooperation decision of Congress, and they have called for immediate and unconditional boycott of government and government-aided colleges. Those students attending the All India Student Conference at Nagpur, they have extended the support for immediate and unconditional boycott of government and government-aided colleges and advised the students of India to respond to it. Soon after their return of the students from the All India Students Conference held at Nagpur, the students came back to Assam and they were very much upbeat in implementing the decisions of the conference. They found Chandranath Harma as the leader of the hour. Now, Chandranath Harma has become the leader of the students of Assam. By this time, in all their noble endeavors, they were also being encouraged. Those leaders, those students are encouraged by Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhuri, Triguna Borua, and Muhibuddin Ahmed. But there occurred a difference of opinion regarding the boycott of classes between two factions of leaders. Torunram Phukon, Kulodhar Solia, Nobin Chandra Bordloi did not favor immediate boycott of classes, whereas leaders like Chandranath Sharma, Vishnuram Medhi, and Rohini Kumar Chaudhary pleaded in favor of boycott of classes. When there was a tussle, they put the motion for vote. While it put the motion for vote, the motion fell through. Guwahati, however, was then throbbing with the excitement of non-cooperation. The boycott upsurge actually rocked Cotton College in last part of January 1921. Guwahati now became the center, now became the hotbed of non-cooperation movement. But the upsurge actually rocked Cotton College in last part of January 1921, when students resolved to go on strike for an indefinite period. Students of Cotton College, they resolved to go on strike for indefinite period in support of non-cooperation movement. Hundreds of students in Assam came out of school and colleges. Lakshidhar Sharma, a number of students studying in Calcutta during that time, also left for Assam to take part in the organizational work and in the propaganda of those messages of non-cooperation to different places. So all students now ready, some of them already left Calcutta, some students, lot of students in Guwahati, Assam, they boycott their classes. The Directorate of Public Instruction, that is DPI of Assam, later estimated that of those who joined movement, about 1,500 students never returned to their classes. After the suspension of non-cooperation movement, around 1,500 students never returned to their classes. In those days, it was a very big number. Students put great spirit into the movement. Accompanied by their teachers, the students began to move from village to village, propagating the message of non-cooperation and explain the people about the ill effect of opium smoking. In a meeting organized by the striking students of Cotton College at Polakbari on 6 January 1921, the students of Cotton College, they organized a meeting at Polakbari on 6 January 1921, and in that meeting, Nobin Chandra Bordloi called upon the government officials to tender their resignation. During one such protest meeting at Soigaon, shopkeepers burned cigarettes to mark protest against the use of foreign goods. Torunram Phukon was inducing the tailors at Guwahati not to make garments out of foreign cloth. The tea gardens workers, those tea garden workers, the tea garden workers of the remotest localities who were being worst victim of the racial hatred and downright economic exploitation were now greatly encouraged to launch their struggle more vigorously in the most favorable condition created by the non-cooperation movement. All the tea garden workers, even the remotest area, those tea garden workers are normally the sufferer of racial hatred, and they are now exploited, economically exploited. Now they have started joining the non-cooperation movement. On May 1921, laborers of 13 tea gardens in Sargola and Lonai Valley of Karimganj. Those laborers of 13 tea gardens of Karimganj district, the places are Sargola and Lonai Valley. They have started strikes against the increase of their wages. They have gone strikes for wage increase. Then, with slogan Mahatma Gandhi ki joy, around 9,000 workers, those workers assembled at Chandpur railway terminus of Assam Bengal Railway with the intention of crossing the river Padma by steamer to Golunda to leave their respective houses. Around 9,000 workers of those tea gardens, they assembled near the Chandpur railway terminus of Assam Bengal roadways, and they want to cross the Padma river by steamer to leave for the respective home. And government called this mass action of the laborers. They declared it an exodus of the laborer. Determined to stop those laborers, the authority ordered immediate removal of the gangway, and in the process, some of the people drowned in the river Padma. As a protest against those inhuman action, the employees of Assam Bengal roadways and the steamer navigation services went on indefinite strike. Because of those human activity of the government, the Assam Bengal roadways, the workers of the Assam Bengal roadways and the steamer navigation, they go on indefinite strikes. The pleaders, the advocates of Guwahati decided on June 3 to suspend practice for 3 days against that brutal action of the authorities towards the Chandpur laborers. Torun Ram Phukon and Nobin Chandra Bordoi addressed the railwaymen at Lamding on June 9, 1921, calling upon those workers of railway to join the strike, which was almost petered out following an ultimatum and an acute dislocation of food supply. In this historic strike, about 11,000 employees of the railways participated in the strike, and out of those 11,000 employees, 4,500 employees lost their jobs. Till 1921, there was not a provincial congress in Assam. Till 1921, a provincial congress was not set up in Assam, although the Indian National Congress was formed in 1885 at Bombay by A.O. Humi. In Assam, almost simultaneously formation of Indian National Congress, there was an organization called Jorhat Harbojirik Sabha. Then Jorhat Harbojirik Sabha was formed in 1886 and subsequently followed by another organization called the Assam Association that also formed during the peak time of Swadeshi movement. But with the launch of the non-cooperation movement, it needs therefore arose to have a separate provincial congress for Assam. The initiative in forming one was taken by the leaders of Assam Association, and for that, those who are leading the non-cooperation movement of Assam, those leaders wanted to have a provincial congress at Assam. And accordingly, the first Assam Provincial Congress Committee was formed in a meeting held on 5th June 1921 at the private residence of Nobin Chandra Bordloi. Assam Provincial Congress Committee was formed on June 5th, 1921 in the residence of Nobin Chandra Bordloi, although Bordloi himself was the convener of the meeting. He could not be present on the meeting. In his absence, Krishna Kanto Bhattacharya, the editor of Bilakhini, was in the chair, and the Assam Provincial Congress was formed. APCC covered 6 districts of Brahmaputra Valley under its jurisdiction and headquarters at Guwahati. The districts of Kachar and Sylhet in the Surma Valley remained as before under Bengal Provincial Congress. APCC was formed with Kulorur Chalia as the president, Badrinarayan Agarwala as the vice president, and Nobin Chandra Bordloi as the general secretary. However, a large number of members of APCC members desired to install Torun Ramphukon on the chair of the president of Assam Provincial Congress, and that is why leaders like Chandranath Homa and others persuaded Torun Ramphukon. At the time he was working as a lecturership in the government art law college, and they persuaded Torun Ramphukon to resign from his jobs, and ultimately he resigned from his lecturership and he became the first president of Assam Provincial Congress Committee. And Kulorur Chalia then agreed and vacated, and he became the vice president of APCC. The reconstituted APCC elected Torun Ramphukon, Nobin Chandra Bordloi, Kulorur Chalia, Chandrakanta Harma, Kanak Chandra Harma, Krishnanath Harma as the members of All India Congress Committee, and all those members unanimously decided to invite Mahatma Gandhi to visit Assam. APCC also set up district Congress committee in its subdivision, and again in the villages and in the Moja, in all levels. APCC started their Congress committee. Non-cooperation now achieved considerable success in all districts valley. Non-cooperation by this time achieved considerable success in all districts of Assam Valley. Hartals, processions, meeting, boycott, picketing became the regular feature of the urban areas. Every day you notice hartal, procession, meeting, boycott and picketing mainly in the urban areas. Boycott of foreign goods and propagation of khadi also were pursued with equal enthusiasm and vigor. Delegates of Assam Provincial Congress Committee attending the meeting of AICC at Bombay in July 1921 extended an invitation to Mahatma Gandhi to visit Assam. They extended an invitation to Mahatma Gandhi to visit Assam in order to propagate the message of non-cooperation among the masses. Gandhiji made his first trip to Assam in August 1921. Mahatma Gandhi stayed in Assam for 12 days. During those period, he visited several places of the province and delivered speeches in all places. He called to boycott everything foreign, and he was so impressed that all people, they used to throw ungrudgingly everything of the kind they had, even though their personal belongings, to the huge bonfire raised at the end of each meeting. Mahatma Gandhi called for boycott of foreign goods, and he was so impressed that people of Assam, throwing everything, even their personal belongings, to the bonfire that is normally raised at the end of each meeting. So people throw in the bonfire everything of even their personal belonging. Gandhiji was very much impressed to see that in every house in Assam there was a handloom, and that every Assamese woman was in the adept the art of weaving and spinning. Mahatma Gandhi showed that every house of Assam, every Assamese family had a weaving, those spinning. They knew that each and every Assamese women knew to work in weaving, and they knew the threading through the spinning. So Mahatma Gandhi was very much impressed looking at those Assamese women. Gandhiji had praised the progress of movement in Assam, and he wrote an article. The article was Lovely Assam, published in Young India, where he expressed the hope that Assam, with her women folk proficient in spinning and weaving, could take the Swaraj earlier than any other province of India. So this about all the praise, all those praises given by Mahatma Gandhi to the Assamese women folk and Assamese people. In November 1921, National Volunteer Corps was formed, which according to Congress enrolled around 70,000 people as members. The government then started repressive measures. It demoralizes the Congress officers and arrested Congress leaders, and it did so injudiciously that apprehension of some of the leaders like R.K. Chaudhary, Muhammad Toibullah, Gaurikanto Talukdar, Deben Ujir created wide resentment among the masses. In all, 1,500 congressmen were kept detained in different district jails of Assam. Around 1,500 congressmen were detained in different jails of Assam. Reports of police atrocities from several places of Assam, and the most serious one from the Surma Valley, that is called the Kanair Ghat, in which place there was a firing on the angry crowd on 5th February 1921. There was a firing on the angry crowd in the Surma Valley, Kanair Ghat, on February 15, 1922, and bringing death to 6% and injury to many. When all this was reported to the Indian National Congress by the Assam delegates attending the Ahmedabad session, Gandhiji sent Madan Mohan Malviya and Dr. Rajendra Prasad to Assam on May 1922 to make on-the-spot study of the situation. In the following month, in the month of August, C. Rajagopali also visited Assam along with the members of those Civil Disobedience Inquiry Committee and put high tribute to the untiring efforts of the young nationalist worker of Assam. This all about the non-cooperation movement that was taken place in Assam and Surma Valley, and those atrocities of government on the masses. And also we talk about the visit of Mahatma Gandhi and his stay about 12 days in Assam. On the All India front, the progress of the non-cooperation movement had met with a serious setback at Sauri Sora, a village in the Gorakhpur district of United Province, where the infuriated mob had murdered about 22 policemen. This was the setback in the non-cooperation movement, and that setback took place in Sauri Sora, in a village of Gorakhpur district of United Province in the month of February 1922. Immediately after that incident, Gandhiji suspended single-handedly the non-cooperation movement and urged upon the congressmen to remain faithful to the principle of non-violence, and asked those congressmen to undertake the constructive programs of Swadeshi. So Mahatma Gandhi was very much upset on that incident, and Mahatma Gandhi single-handedly suspended non-cooperation movement on 10th March 1922 and asked those congressmen to concentrate on the principle of non-violence and asked congressmen to work constructive program in the Swadeshi. Meanwhile, with the revolutionaries overthrowing the Turkish Sultan from his sultanate and consequently from the altar of Khilafat, the Khilafat movement also came to an end. Suspension of the non-cooperation movement frustrated young leaders like Chandrakanta Harma in Assam, who however died soon after July 1922 at the age of 33. Although the freedom fighters in general were demoralized at this abrupt suspension by Mahatma Gandhi, of course the movement expedited certain reforms in Assam. It forced the government to modify opium policy, which eventually led to gradual decline on the opium consumption. Moreover, it was perhaps this movement which gave major setbacks. It was perhaps this movement which gave major push, not the setback, major push to the democratization of the local bodies. A revised set of rules under local self-government of 1915 was introduced, and the Assam Municipal Act was also passed in 1923. This all about the discussion of non-cooperation movement launched by Indian National Congress under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi and Assam's participation in the non-cooperation movement. Now the question comes, normally question comes in the interview, you may ask who are the leaders that took part in the non-cooperation movement of 1920 to 1922. The leaders, you give the focus on the leaders like Torun Ramphukon, Chandranath Harma and Nobin Chandra Bordle. Those three leaders are always in the forefront, even in the taking decisions. Chandranath Harma was a young leader. He took lead among the students' body. So main leaders in the non-cooperation movement were Torun Ramphukon, Chandranath Harma, Nobin Chandra Bordle. Over and above, you also remember those names of Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary, Deveshwar Harma, Triguna Borwa, Mohibuddin Ahmed, Kulhara Solia, Vishnuram Methi, Rohini Kumar Chaudhary, Mohammad Toibullah, and the later part G.N. Bordloi, that is Gopinath Bordloi. So those are the leaders. Of course, there are a lot of leaders, but these are the only names that come in front of us. So this all about the discussion of non-cooperation movement in Assam. Hope you took interest, you enjoyed the discussion, and thank you.